all, time for coffee with Kilroy, or what I sometimes call beverage in a book. My beverage, well, I think you know what that is. And yours, well, I hope it is something to your liking. The book today is Repeat Offender. I've covered this book several times because it has several entries. In fact, 365 military history entries. This is Days of War, great stories from military history for every day of the year. So it's basically kind of an anthology of military history stories and anecdotes tied to that onto the date it happened. And today's date is December 7th. And on that date is a very important event that forever changed the fates of many nations, but more specifically the United States with its entry into World War II and Japan. And, its struggle against the United States and ultimate defeat. Um, and then the reconstruction of the country. December 7th is Pearl Harbor. And I've always had I've always found it interesting and, a very unique attack in history, something that, we all, if you're in America, you probably grew up listening to FDR's speech of a day that will live in infamy, in which I'll put a snippet of that at the end of this, so you'll have a piece of that as well. But this event, my perspective on this event changed a little bit when I was on a business trip in Japan and went to the museum that's right next to the palace. And I was looking at pictures and paintings and art and sculptures and what have you. And I came across this painting of Pearl Harbor on December 8th, 1941. And I was like, what is that? December 8th. And it was the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I'll put some pictures of that at the end as well. It's also my banner page. If you ever go to my channel, or which you're on it right now, probably, if you're watching this. That's my banner photo, is that painting. And it struck me because it was December 8th. And if you've ever listened to FDR's speech, it's December 7th is a day that will live in infamy. Well, because of the international dateline, it was December 8th when Japan attacked, according to the Japanese. And the thing that struck in my mind is the perspective. We always look at it from our perspective and how we grew up and how we're taught history. And this was an instance where just that change in date made me start to try to think of, well, what was the perspective of Japan, or what are other perspectives of this attack? So with that, I thought I would read from the Tales of War. Even though this is December 7th, the entry I'm going to read is December 8th, because it really is kind of taking it from the Japanese perspective. And as you can see here, I got some maps or game boards, or whatever you want to call it. A little bit of a teaser. I'll talk a little bit about some of the games that cover the attack on Pearl Harbor. There's not a lot of games that cover the attack on Pearl Harbor, and that's not surprising. It was a surprise attack, not much of a fight. There was a little bit of pushback, but it pretty much was an ambush. And so there's not much to make a game of it, but I'll talk a little bit about that. But for now, let's get into the book. And read the December 8th entry as I get some coffee and see what they have to say about December 8th. So here we have, go a little bit closer there. 8 December, a Pyrrhic victory for the Japanese. 1941. Today, in only 14 hours, Japan launched 7 nearly simultaneous attacks in a breathtaking audacious plan to take control of the entire South Pacific. At almost the same moment that their aircraft were ravaging the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, Japanese soldiers were storming ashore in Thailand and on the northern coast of Malaya. And their bombers were hammering the British airfield on Hong Kong and American bases on Guam and in the Philippines. The bombing of Pearl Harbor is dated 7 December because Pearl Harbor is on the other side of the international date line. Well, thank you for that note. I wish I'd had that when I went to the museum. Anyway, the last to be attacked on this long day was a tiny wishbone-shaped coral atoll called Wake Island, which lies 2,300 miles west of Pearl Harbor and is about the same distance southeast of Japan. Only 4 months before, a detachment of 499 U.S. Marines from the 1st Marine Defense Battalion had set up the first permanent garrison on Wake, accompanied by 68 members of the U.S. Navy. In addition to the rifles, the Marines were armed with an odd assortment of firepower: 6 5-inch guns taken from a dismantled battleship, 12 M3 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, 18 50 caliber machine guns, and about 30 miscellaneous machine guns of varying caliber and condition. With them were over 1,100 civilian construction workers to help build the base. At 12 noon local time, 36 twin-tailed Mitsubishi G3M2 bombers caught the American by surprise, releasing their loads on Wake's half-completed air and submarine base. They destroyed 8 of the 12 Marine F-4F Wildcat fighters on the ground, killing 23 Marines and wounding 11 more, as well as killing about 25 civilian workmen. Although the Americans had been radioed the news of the attack on Pearl Harbor, they had no radar, and the pounding surf of the Wake had prevented them from hearing the approach of the Japanese planes. After 2 more days of bombing at dawn on 11 December, and an enemy task force of 3 light cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 patrol boats, and 2 transport ships carrying 450 men of the Special Naval Landing Force, Japanese Marines, appeared off the coast. The approaching enemy ships, there we go. The approaching enemy ships shelled the shore, setting ablaze several oil tanks. The American Marine commanders, Major James Devereaux, held fire until the Japanese were only 4,550 yards away, and then opened up with his 5-inch guns, severely damaging one of the light cruisers. Then 3 salvos slammed into the Japanese destroyer, touching off a massive explosion in the ammunition hold that sent her to the bottom with all 167 men aboard. She was the first Japanese surface warship sunk during the Second World War. Meanwhile, Marine Captain Henry Elrod led the 4 remaining Wildcats against the enemy task force. Elrod flew directly into the flight of the 22 Japanese planes, downing 2 Zeros and damaging 2 bombers. He then strafed a second enemy destroyer, dropping off bombs on her rear deck, which detonated the depth charges stored below and sank the ship with all hands. But the enemy anti-aircraft fire had perforated the plane's oil tank, and he was forced to crash land on Wake's rocky beach. His Wildcat, a write-off. Stunned by the Americans' forced resistance, the Japanese task force withdrew. Over the next 11 days, the Americans would lose their last remaining fighters despite the Marines' near miraculous cannibalization and refitting of damaged planes, as the attackers incessantly bombed the island in preparation for another landing, which would come on 23 December. Reinforced by 2 aircraft carriers and an additional 1,500 Japanese Marines, the invasion force struck the beach at 2:45 a.m. The 2 converted destroyers landing the troops were set alight by Marine guns and by the invaders, which were now ashore. For over 12 hours, the vastly outnumbered and outgunned defenders held off attackers moving from place to place, often in hand-to-hand fighting. Before they were overrun, their 5-inch guns damaged 2 more destroyers. Without a plane to fly, Captain Elrod organized a unit of ground troops into the beach defense and repulsed repeated Japanese attacks, but he was shot and killed while throwing a hand grenade. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. But no amount of heroics could save the American forces on Wake, and at last they were forced to surrender. Of the original force of 499 Marines, 49 were now dead, with another 32 wounded. Of the Navy's 68 officers and men, 3 were killed and 5 were wounded. In addition, 70 of the 1,100 civilian workers were killed, with the exception of about 100 workers whom the Japanese kept on Wake to do forced labor. All the prisoners were interned in prisoners of war camps until the end of the war. It was a Pyrrhic victory for the Japanese, who had suffered almost 800 killed in action with 1,000 more wounded. 2 of their light cruisers had been damaged and 2 destroyed, and an escort vessel sunk. 72 of their aircraft had been hit, 21 of them shot down. American planes periodically bombarded Japanese-occupied Wake for the rest of the war. One American pilot who attacked it was future President George H.W. Bush, who flew his combat mission there. The Japanese garrison finally surrendered on 4 September 1945, 21 days after their nation itself capitulated. So this really talks about the Battle of Wake, which there are a few games on that, and I might cover that at a later date. But I wanted to, touch upon December 7th being, the attack on Pearl Harbor and showing you the different perspective. The Japanese had mobilized several attacks on that day, on December 8th. With the intent of taking vast tracts of land and controlling vast tracts of oceans across the Pacific. And Pearl Harbor was just one piece of that, but probably the most dramatic and, with hindsight, to our benefit, the most fatal for them. So let's talk a little bit about the games that cover the attack on Pearl Harbor, and there are more than just these, but these are 2 that I have in my game library. I have others as well, but these are the ones I want to talk about. One is the Day of Infamy, which is designed by Paul Rohrbaugh. It uses his kind of one of his trademark systems of a regular or standard deck of cards with jokers to kind of control some of the action and the activations of the units. But here is the map board that comes with this. This came as part of, I think, like the Black Swan series, or maybe a free game with some of the Against the Odds magazine orders that I've done over time. And I think I might have done a video on this, or at least an unbagging, so I'll put a link to that here if I can find that as well. But here you see Ford Island, and again, if you look at my banner photo, and I'll put pictures of it again, that's really what the banner photo is showing. It's the attack on Ford Island, and it's basically coming from this angle. That picture is coming from this angle here, because you see Battleship Row here, and you can see some of the explosions and stuff that are going on from Battleship Row. The other game that I like to talk about briefly is Task Force, and I know I will put a link to this because I did an unboxing of this game from VUCA Simulations, and I want to thank them that this was sent to me to cover, and I still need to do some more play of it, and so I can do some more reviews and discussion of this. But this is a very interesting game. It's kind of a reprint by VUCA. I think it was originally published by a Japanese publication, and it's a Japanese design. But it's a very industrious game, and it covers all the carrier battles in the Pacific. So it covers several battles with a very unique system and very good quality components, which is kind of a trademark of VUCA. In fact, you can tell it's so heavy, I can barely lift it up here. But this is an introductory scenario that is in that game. The attack on Pearl Harbor. The other maps in this game are mounted, and they're double-sided because you cover different scenarios. This one's a paper map, but it's just really covering, mainly Ford Island here. And again, if the image in my banner photo that I'll put some bit in here is really kind of looking at it from this angle here, or maybe kind of this angle, because you can see Battleship Row right here and some of the explosions that are taking place. But there is Ford Island, and then of course you're going to have all these ships that are, represented by counters in the game as well to set up here. And you're mainly doing attack here. And I believe this is an introductory scenario, and I think this is kind of solitaire. I think you're just mainly playing the Japanese and seeing what kind of results you can have, or what kind of damage you can do on Pearl Harbor or on Battleship Row. So there you have it. That is my Coffee with Kilroy Tales of War for today. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you're enjoying your day. And if it's morning and you're drinking coffee with me, well, thank you. And if it's evening and you've had a long day, you deserve a break as I drink my coffee here. But love to know your thoughts on any of this, on the perspective of the kind of the different, looking at things from a different perspective. The Battle of Wake Island, which really this entry is about, or the Battle of or the attack, I should say. It really wasn't much of a battle, but the attack on Pearl Harbor, Task Force games, or Day of Infamy from Paul Rohrbaugh. Any of that is fair game, and thank you for stopping by.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Thanks for watching.